Welcome, everybody, tuning in live from New York. I'm Dayal here with Kishor Chandra and Acyuta Gopi. And this is Spirit Matters, our daily Bhakti Center podcast, where we were talking about this the other day. What is this podcast? What did we talk about? And Acyuta said, everything. She said it's real talk and Bhakti. We get down into it, and we're really glad that you guys are here. Yesterday we missed Kishore. He had a emergency crisis with his significant other across seas, who had to throw his luggage away because Qatar Airlines would not allow him to take 2 kilos extra of luggage. Meanwhile, we flew back Air India, which is like a big bus in the sky that everything else can go wrong, but they just don't care what you bring on the plane. I literally secured my merdunga on like a spare seat with a seatbelt. And so anyways, we missed Kishore yesterday, but everything he was there for his partner, and we're glad that you're back today. Acyuta and Kishore, how are you guys doing? How's your morning going?
I'm doing great. I missed you all yesterday, but yeah, I had to take care of that little personal thing with my partner, just being there for moral support. But I also had a really interesting experience yesterday, and I thought it was interesting in context of what you all were talking about yesterday, which was kind of labels and the labels we put on others and how people view us, and even more so than labels, I guess what I'm thinking and what I've been thinking about and where I'm at this morning is thinking about roles and the roles we play in society and how
Mm.
people view us and how we view ourselves. And I
I
can
just
I can
posted
talk
about
about
that
that more, but
yesterday.
I wanna. You did?
Roles. Yeah,
There you go.
it's in the ether.
There you go.
Anyways, I just had a burst excitement interruption of you, but
But I want to hear from Ajuta. How are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm doing well. I think along the same lines of all of this, I've kind of been thinking this morning on how how do we enter into situations, even like you were in yesterday, Kishore, and your partner was in, and not feel angry at God when things like that happen. How do you get to a space where you're like, oh, well, God,
mm,
you're in charge. And then it's like, well, why didn't you make everything smooth sailing for me?
mm,
Which I do feel like sometimes God is like, I'm sorry, when did I ever say that that was going to be? Like, where in the terms and conditions of this material existence agreement did I ever say everything will be smooth sailing and I will make sure that you encounter absolutely no obstacles ever? So I
mm,
just kind of feel like how do we like come into a good balance of just trying to
yeah.
see the gratitude in the moment or see grace in those moments, especially when it becomes uncomfortable. And also it truly goes into those roles that we play for each other and that role that we have with our supreme best friend. Like, if this is our
Mm,
supreme best friend, does that mean that there are never any issues? And then when we're in the midst of issues, it's so easy to fall into the trap of being like, you know what, this is all your fault, God. And I was like, or, maybe I'm giving you a really, like, maybe I'm prepping you for a really awesome blessing,
mm,
but we're just sitting there
yeah.
resisting it the whole time.
Yeah. I
So,
I I love all of that. And I was immediately thinking of in the later part of the Gita, where Krishna says that, if you surrender, I'll protect you from all types of fear and don't worry. But I was just thinking, he doesn't say that nothing is going to happen. He just says, it's almost like I'll carry you through it. It's not like, okay, nothing bad is going to happen. Essentially we talk about bad or good. But it's almost kind of like the guarantee or the promise or the it's not that those things don't that life goes smoothly, but it's that we become able to. It's like the Gita itself is taking place on a battlefield in a crisis, and so it's not that we avoid the complexities of life, but that we learn how to navigate the complexities of life from a much better, deeper way. I had a lot that I wanted to share in terms of like roles and et cetera, but I'm curious because I'm curious the context that you brought that up, Kishore, and maybe what was going on for you that you brought that up. I have a feeling why you brought that up, and I have a sense, just based on what happens yesterday. But I'd like to hear from you and curious, so that if I can see if I'm right or not.
Sure. Well, it was brought up in a variety of ways, right? Because I was in the middle, on Monday mornings before the podcast, I'm starting to learn Hindustani kind of classical Indian music, and it's super cool, and I'm like super excited about it. So while I was in the middle of my lesson, I was getting all these calls and messages from my significant other, like freaking out, like right at the time that is supposed to be right when the lesson is ending slash going into the podcast. And so it was such a like shift for me. I'm like, oh, I'm like trying to do this and then going into this, and I'm supposed to behave like this. And then for my partner, I kind of just needed to like switch everything off and just like be there for him because he was in distress. And it is interesting. This is another point. I'll just go off on this one tangent and then I'll talk more. It was interesting you mentioned Acyuta about like, in those moments, how do I protect myself from not getting upset with God and getting upset with Krishna? Because I think in those moments also it's kind of easy to one be just mad and frustrated when things aren't going our way, and two to be like, well, look, all these other people, like everything is going their way. And something I really, I read the situation, I didn't want to say it. I didn't bring up that for Air India, we like had the best time. Actually, when we were in India, there was a point I was so bewildered in a good way. There was a point where we were flying from Mumbai to Rishikesh, and like the airline crew loved us so much that they took a photo with us. Remember, Dayal? They were like, "We're gonna take a photo of all of you because we just love you so much, and you all are so perfect. You're the." I was like, "In what world are we living in right now?"
Oh
Where like the
yeah, when we
airline crew,
we
do you
checked into the
remember?
flight. Yeah.
Yeah, checked into the flight and I was just thinking, I was like, this would never happen for my significant other. Like he has some bad airport karma. So anyway, in that context of just kind of like switching into that mode. But then
Yeah.
also yesterday, I tried my best. I was pretty successful. I'll say I was 90% successful. I tried my best to take a day off. And it was really interesting. I know. I know. And it was really interesting to kind of see like just like me purposefully trying to make myself absent or removed from a situation and just seeing how like others interacted with that. And it was just interesting to see like the role I play versus like me as a person. And I think that they're two different things. And I was really, really, I had a moment yesterday where I was just like, huh, like there are all these things that I do in life and people see me a certain way. And that comes with a whole sense of a story and responsibility and all of the stuff. And then there are like the things that are like when you kind of strip everything down to the bare bones. I was really like having this moment of like humanity yesterday. I was like, what do I need? Like what is good for me? And I was like, I went for a long walk in the park and I was just sitting in the park like receiving the sun, and I had one of these moments where I'm just like, I just need sun. Like I just need sunlight. I don't need to respond to any messages. But it's also for me like seeing how I interact with those roles. 'Cause I was like Dayal and I used to do, we're gonna do some this year, like digital detoxes where like we literally remove people's phones, we have them give them in. And people would report like day one where like they would have these like phantom buzzing of the phones where they'd be like, oh my phone. And it's, no, I have no phone. And so I was having that yesterday. I was like, but I have to respond. I have to be available. I have to do this. And I was just like, no, I just need to breathe and I just need sunlight and I just need to
Mm.
like I just need to like be in my meditation. And I really, really, it was an interesting moment because I like read, like I read for like an hour. I can't remember the last time I read for an hour. Like I put my phone on airplane mode and I read for an hour.
Mm.
And it really helped me understand how, because this is kind of the point that I wanted to bring up, and then I want to hear from all of you. Because when I was listening to the podcast, I heard the podcast from yesterday about labels, and it's like I I agree with everything that all of you said about like how we don't want to put people into a box, and we are approaching someone's story and they're the whole package, this whole thing. But I also think it's kind of powerful to understand, maybe I'll use this word instead. It's powerful to understand the roles I play in society and roles I play in other people's lives. And when I like it kind of like I felt like yesterday, like, oh, I have the power to enter that role, and I
Mm,
also have power to like push the pause button on that role for a moment because I'm not playing that role at all times. And actually, it
yeah.
gets a little crazy if I am playing that role constantly forever. It would be really weird if I'm like, you know, constantly in, let's say, leadership responsibility role, and then I'm bringing that into, let's say, like my personal life. It's like I had this like clear switch where I was just like, no, these two are different things. And so I really want to
Yeah.
hear from all of from you both about like, yeah, like role switching and how that plays out in your life. Because for me at least, like it was a really good reminder of like,
Yeah.
oh, these are different things that I inhabit in life and they don't define me. I step into them.
Yeah. This is exactly what I was reflecting on last night. It's so interesting. And I almost didn't post something last night, and then it was like late at night, and then like I couldn't sleep, and I got up and I posted something, and it was exactly on this point. I was reading this verse, or I was looking for a verse, and I found this verse. It's from the 10th chapter of the Gita near the end, 39. And Krishna says, furthermore, O Arjuna, I am the generating seed of all existences. There's no being, moving or non moving, that can exist without me, capital M. And the reflection I wrote was I wrote this prayer: God, may I stop thinking that I need to play your role in anyone else's life. And then the reflection was how much there's so much stress that comes when I operate above my pay grade and think that I need to be something more than I'm able or supposed to be in another person's life. And that there's sometimes, especially, I mean, and that was why I brought it up, because I was thinking in the context of significant others, because it was like your partner was having a crisis. It's like, I need you to be there for me. And it's like, I think that's natural in any intimate romantic relationship. It could also be there in friendships or other family relationships. Like, I need you to be a certain something for me. And sometimes it takes a lot of humility or a challenge, or it can be a big point of tension or disagreement where it's like, I can't be everything for you. And there's a limit to what I'm able to be, because my role isn't to be everything, because that's a role that somebody else, a divine higher power, is meant to play for all of us. And if you're my everything, then there's no need for God. There's no need for divine higher power. And so it's like that. Also, I think it comes with everything you're saying, also comes with a certain detachment and humility on our part, and a courage to admit what role I can't play. Because it's one is the roles that people expect of me and all the pressure. But then, as you're saying, it's also the roles that we take on that we actually have no capacity or ability to actually fulfill in toto, but we sort of don't want to disappoint people. We want to be accepted. Sometimes roles are the currency we use to get into people's lives. That me, and as of a myself, I'm not worthy of acceptance or being with you. So, but if I play the role, if I'm needed in some way, then now I have a leg to stand on. And so the idea was that we do have roles to play in people's lives, but it's just really important to make sure we understand which role is ours and which ones aren't. And it's such a critical point, I think, in relationships, in I mean, we understand this very much so in like corporate life. If like if there's, okay, this is my role, this is not my role, etc. But the same is true in our just relationships and friendships. And so I think that there was something there that resonated, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I want to hear from Achuta.
I think it's really interesting to look at what life is like now, because everybody is also kind of living their own reality TV show,
Mm,
like at the same time that they're living their lives. So at some point, we think, like you said, it's easy when it's a job. This is my job. I go there and I perform this role from 9 to 5. Then what happens when you have like untraditional jobs like all of us, and then your lifestyle or an aspect of that becomes your brand. And then the waters get so muddied because there is no, it's not like you turn off the job and then you are you your brand is now your this lifestyle, this career, everything, so it gets so difficult to really just turn all that off and remember, who the heck was I? Like, who was I outside of all of this?
Mm.
And who am I going to continue to be? But it is important, it reminds me of when Danya was saying, she's like, so essentially what you're saying is good devotees have boundaries, and we need those boundaries in life. And this is, even within Bhagavad Gita, I think talking about varnashram system and varnashram dharma, Krishna is like, you've got like chatur varna maya shrishtam, like you've got all of these different categories, and I don't necessarily think that they have to be bad. And what happens is, when we lock someone's role into that, in all cases, for perpetuity, and that's
Mm.
all you'll ever be, right? Krishna's like, no, you have these roles and you have these periods in life, but they also shift and they change, and they're there for a reason, but also a season, and not always. So, we've got this, oh, you are a Brahmin and you are a Kshatriya and you are a Vaishya. And he's like, yeah, you have those at work. Then you come home and you're a dad. Then you come home and you're a family person. Or you were a student and so you were a celibate monk. Yeah, for like a couple years. Then you graduated. Now you got a family. Like, he's like, these are categories, but they're not supposed to be these hardcore boxes that you never ever leave. Life is
Mm.
supposed to move and flow. And I think we lose sight of that in, like, trying to label and categorize people to make ourselves feel more comfortable with it. You now stay in that label and that box for forever. There's no moving out of it. There's no adjusting the guidelines of the box. It's just it. It's all you are. So I think it gets very, very confusing, and like you said, dangerous, because that is us operating above our pay grade. Please don't quit your day jobs.
Pashi's like, thanks, I'm quitting my job today.
But yeah,
I think
I think it's really important for us to remember that this is not like our eternal constitution
hmm,
is servitors and lovers of God. That's an eternal constitution.
Mm.
Everything else is subject to change.
hmm. And I think that it's so important to that point, Achuta, is so important that everything else is subject to change. And I think it's just a good barometer when I am feeling like, in like stuck in the mire, in the mud, like when I'm feeling stagnant in a identity or in a role, when I'm finding myself only able to see from the lens of this role or this identity that I play out, like something is amiss. And I think in modern society, what's really difficult is, we have all of these identity politics playing out. And like we mentioned, I think it was last week where we talked about, people who come from oppressed entities, they're coming to Krishna consciousness. They've worked their entire life to build up these identities because, in society, it's like, you're oppressed, you're an oppressed minority. And then you come to bhakti and it's like, oh, you're not this body, you're not this, you're not that, you're spiritual, which is truth. It's the ultimate truth, which is true. However, I think it's so much more nuanced than that, because it's like, how do I understand the value of this role? Like, how do I understand the value of this identity, why it has come into my life, how I'm inhabiting it, for what reason? And I think if we just get a little more introspective about those things, it becomes less like, no, this is who I am and this is what I do and this is what I think. And if you don't think this way, or if you're not part of my crew, identity role, whatever subsection of society, then we can't, be friends. You all were talking about atheists yesterday. I thought that was so interesting because it's like that. It's like, no, this is my identity, this is your identity, you're over there, I'm over here. And I think when things become really concrete like that, and we're not digging deep into understanding, one, the ultimate dharma of all souls, but also two, the fact that like you were saying, Achuta, like we're here in these temporary situations. Essentially, we're inhabiting these roles in a temporary way for a reason, for my karma, for this, for my family, etc., for whatever. And I think that the more we can realize that like that's happening to all of us, it just gives a deeper sense of humanity. Like, oh, you're going through this role stuff too? So am I. Cool. Like, they're different. Cool. Let's learn from each other, you know?
Mm. I was also thinking of as both of you guys were saying I was thinking of the word purpose was coming to mind. Because also as you were talking about like the boxes, we all have I think we talked about in a previous episode somewhere like Sanatan Dharma and Swadharma, and these words are even used, or at least Swadharma is used in the Bhagavad Gita in terms of like you're an eternal spirit soul, but then you also have your duties as a warrior, as a father, as a family person. He's talking to Arjuna. And so and I was thinking that really looking at the word purpose in the sense of what purpose are our roles meant to fulfill. And sometimes we get so caught up in the role itself or the label itself, we lose sight of whether or not it's fulfilling its purpose. And so we can be holding on to a role, but if I'm not fulfilling the purpose that it was designed to fulfill, then what use is the role itself? And if I can fulfill the purpose by taking some other role or even stepping outside the bounds of that role sometimes, then whether or not I'm that label or role or not is inconsequential because we lose the spirit of what we're trying to do in the first place. And so I think that sometimes it's also a classic example that's coming to my mind is like, you're talking about like parents or being a parent. And I don't have a human child, I have a dog who's very spoiled. We know that. I can't mention my dog without mentioning that. But it's like the idea of somebody being a parent and it's like they're doing everything for their child, but the child's unhappy. They're working so much, they're buying so many things, everything. This is the role I play of a good parent. I'm providing money, I'm providing a place to live and school and all this stuff. And it's like, well, I just need you, like, as a human in my life, as a caretaker, as a presence. And so it's like we get so caught up, I'm playing the role of husband or wife or father or mother or sister or coworker, but it's like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not taking the time to, is this working? Is this working?
Yeah, there's there's a really cool term. This idea of shaktivish avatar, right? So the idea of an incarnation of divinity for a specific purpose, right? And so Srila Prabhupada speaks about these shaktivish avatars. They've been infused with divine empowerment, but not even for the whole course of that incarnation's life. So if we look at the case of, say, Parshuram, Shaktivish avatar, he was infused with a divine potency for a specific amount of time. And then through the course of even a pastime, Parshuram gives that divine potency away. Here you go. I've performed my function. It's okay. You got it now. And so we hear about Shaktivish avatars. We hear about it through Jesus. We hear about it through other empowered individuals. But this is also happening in our lives on a very minute scale. Sometimes we become empowered by divine grace, but we have to understand that if that's not, if we were meant to perform a certain function in someone's life for a specific amount of time, then it's okay when that time passes for us to step back and say, okay, I was being used clearly by Krishna, and now I can step back. Sometimes it gets really weird for us when we're on the receiving end, right? So if you see somebody that you identify with and say they were identifying as queer, but then they get into a heteronormative relationship, everybody else feels upset and abandoned and totally just bereft. But it's because you were relying on that person to perform a function in your life. Meanwhile, that person hadn't signed up for that. They're trying to live their life. They're trying to make sense of the whole thing, but we've now put that role. Now my life is centered around your role. So we have to understand, what's your pay grade? What's my pay grade? What's God's pay grade? How does that all fit in? So yes, somebody can provide inspiration for a time, and then they can do something that you may not agree with, or whatever the case is. And like we said, not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, or having to throw out the baby or the bathwater. It's being able to look at this and say, okay, that performed a function in my life. Cool. Now what?
I I love that. Kishore was nodding his head and smiling. I've got so much I want to say and take that conversation in a direction. We are running up to the end of our time here today, but I'm bookmarking this. I know exactly where I want to lead off tomorrow. And I also want to hear more from you guys. I want to hear some takeaways from Kimberly. Yesterday, Kimberly's computer crashed. At least that's the excuse she gave before she just hit the leave button. But we want to hear some takeaways from Kimberly and then some final words from Kishor, and then we'll call it a wrap.
There is a limit to what we can be. We can't be everything. Being everything is a role meant for a divine higher power. All of our roles are flexible. They move and flow during different periods in our lives. And also, don't get so caught up in the roles and labels that the sense of purpose it was meant to fulfill is lost.
Don't get too caught up in the roles like that. Kishore, you got a closing word for us?
Yeah, I think this word that's really resonating in my mind is just like our humanity and what that means. And I think that what I'm really feeling and taking away from this is that when we get too concretized in labels or in roles, like when we don't understand the flexibility of moving through these things, we lose a little bit of humanity. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Don't let roles get in the way of your humanity. Beautiful. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for our live audience who's here on Zoom. Thank you for all of our listeners everywhere in the world. If you like what you are hearing, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate it. We read them. We will. We just appreciate being in touch with you guys and hearing your realizations and things about the show. If you want to spend physical time with us, come to New York City. We're at the Bhakti Center Thursday nights for Kirtan each week, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time, or the time in New York if you're physically here. If you want to come to India with us, we're going in the fall. India, fall. Please come. We would love to have you with us. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Please take care, everybody. Be well. And bye-bye.